So let's dive in. Fibonacci Spirals and 21 ways to contribute to Postgres beyond code. And I especially appreciate you guys coming for the very last talk of the day. And I know that I'm the only thing standing between you and plane flights, beer, more food, a nice evening. So before I started, I wanted to put a face to the name Fibonacci. This is Leonardo Bigelow, and he actually has lots of names. He's also known as Leonardo of Pisa, and Fibonacci was his nickname. And Fibonacci actually translates directly to son of Bonacci. And he was a 12th century mathematician. I think everybody in the room here probably knows that already. And I also think everybody in the room is probably familiar with the Fibonacci sequence, because most of us don't end up working as a developer without a big background in mathematics. It's actually interesting. He is not the first person to have discovered the Fibonacci sequence. It was actually discovered hundreds of years before. It's the first writings about it appear to have been in India. And as a young man, he was traveling in the Middle East, and that's when he learned about this. And he came back to Italy, and he published a book called Liber Abaci. I probably mispronounced it. If Jonathan Katz were here, he could correct my Italian. And it was about mathematical methods in commerce. And that book is known for having done two really important things. The first is that it shined a big light on the value of the Hindu and Arabic numbers, which are the numbers we use today. At the time in Italy, they were still using Roman numerals. And so that was really seen as that shift away from Roman numerals to Hindu and Arabic in the Western world. And then he also asked a question about rabbits. How many of you are familiar with the rabbit question? Okay, a bunch of you are. I'd never actually seen the whole thing, so I'm just going to read it to you. It's, if a pair of rabbits is placed in an enclosed area, how many rabbits will be born if we assume that every month the pair of rabbits produces another pair, and that rabbits begin to bear young 2 months after birth? So this shows you that even back then, people were dealing with latency issues, right? Because we got that 2-month delay there. Anyway, the answer is, of course, the Fibonacci sequence. And so my title has the word Fibonacci spiral in it. So of course, I had to include a Fibonacci spiral. Now, how many of you know that the actual way in which this spiral is defined or created? I'll just explain it really quickly. And I just told ads I wouldn't use this thing, but I'm gonna use this thing. So, oh, there you go. So see, 1x1 box, a 1x1 box, a 2x2, a 3x3, a 5x5, an 8x8, right? So the boxes, these tiled boxes of the squares, if you will, they just fit together perfectly, don't they? Which is really, really cool. And then my phone is ringing, and I need to stop it. So stop. There. And then you put a quarter circle in each one of these tiles, and they connect beautifully. And that is the Fibonacci spiral. It's strongly related to something called the golden spiral, which many of you have heard about as well. But the differences are really subtle, and I'm not going there in this talk. So why Fibonacci spirals and Postgres? What do these two things have to do with each other? And there's two choices to answer that question. The first is it because when I was thinking about all the ways you could contribute to Postgres, I was thinking about, well, how that could help Postgres to grow, and how do I model that growth curve? How do I talk to people about the kind of growth you can draw? And is it massive growth? Is it exponential growth? Is it Fibonacci growth? And then I had to figure out, well, what does Fibonacci growth really look like? So this is just a standard plot, linear y-axis, not logarithmic, that shows, I plotted the Fibonacci sequence on here. And this could have been what I was thinking about when I came up with the talk title. Like, how do you increase the number of users and developers and forks and extensions and all the things that we care about in the Postgres world, the number of contributors, the number of customers and companies building around the technology? Maybe that's why I started with it. And maybe I included Fibonacci spirals because I always really wanted to put a Romanesco in one of my talks. So how many of you are familiar with these vegetables and have eaten them? Okay, a few of you. How many of you absolutely love them? They're fascinating. Not only do they taste good, they're beautiful. And each one of these, Like these forms of Fibonacci spiral. But better than that, it's also a fractal. Like there's spirals upon spirals upon spirals upon spirals. It is just the most beautiful looking thing. I remember being very excited. I have two college students, and they're both studying computer science, which, you know, kind of cool, makes me happy. My daughter's actually studying math computer science, and I studied math computer science, so I think that's kind of interesting too. But the first time my son ate a Romanesco, he was probably like 10, 11 years old, and he looked at it and he's like, check this out, I think this might be a fractal. And it was just the coolest moment. Okay, moving on. So, I wanted to point out that these Fibonacci spirals show up in nature all over the place. So this is the bottom of a pine cone, obviously, and there's a spiral in the arrangement of these bracts. You see them in snail shells, you see them in sunflowers, you see them in artichokes. They're just all over the place. Okay, so a little bit about me. Let's dive in. Let's talk about Postgres. I started my career as a software developer working on source code management tools, and I've worn a whole bunch of hats in my career. Developer, program manager. I was an engineering manager for many years in the Solaris operating systems group. So my team created Solaris zones and worked on resource management. I worked at a storage company for a while, and I joined Citus Data about 2.5 years ago to work on Postgres. So that's kind of my first introduction. So for those of you in the room who've been working on Postgres for a decade or more, I commend you. And I look forward to being where you are now. But I've got about 2.5 years of experience. And obviously, Citus was acquired by Microsoft, so I am now a principal at Microsoft. And we're going to dive in and talk about 21 ways to contribute to Postgres beyond code and drive Fibonacci growth. Now, why did I start with beyond code? Well, partly because I mentioned my career. I started off in engineering, and I was an engineering manager for many years. And when I moved over to product and to marketing, there were a bunch of people who were like, well, why are you doing that? And that's not as important, that's not as valuable. And these are people who knew me really well, so they felt comfortable insulting me in that way and questioning my choice. And I was okay with that because I wanted them to be open and direct. But it really made me start to think about the relative value of contributions. And, you know, of course, I now work in marketing and in a product group. And so I care about all the types of contribution. Maybe that's the nature of what I do. How many of you have worked in a small startup in your career? Okay. So I believe that when you're in a small startup, you're forced to recognize that all the roles matter. Because your wallpaper that is your stock is not going to be worth anything unless everybody is pulling their weight in the boat, whether it's solutions engineers, salespeople, marketing, developers, of course developers, the admin for the office. Everybody needs to be on top of their game and collaborating well with each other. So I found this slide when I was researching this talk proposal. And I had written the proposal, I hadn't submitted it yet, and I thought, oh my gosh, what if somebody's already thought of this idea? Not the Romanescos, but the rest of the talk. What if somebody has already given this talk? So sure enough, a few Google searches later, I discovered that Josh Burkas had created a talk, and he mentioned this contribution pie, and how there's code, and then there's everything else. And there's a lot of everything else that people can contribute to. And the name of his talk was actually 50 Ways to Love Your Project. So I'm only going to take you through 21 ways. But Josh's talk from 2013, so it seemed like a good time to kind of revisit the topic. His talk covers a lot more ground and even more ways you can contribute, and I absolutely pay homage to him. I think he did a great job with that. And the difference here is it's newer. I'm going to try to go in a little bit more depth for each of these. His was a total flyby to get through all 50. And so let's dive in. Number one. Obviously, I'm going to start with the basics. This is so obvious. You guys are here. You get that participating in an event, talking to people in the community, being part of the hallway track is a way to contribute. Some of you who are really senior and have been in the Postgres space for a while, you might not realize that you're passing a hallway comment that you forgot about after the event might have a real impact on somebody else's day-to-day job and might help them solve a problem they've been struggling with for a while. So I think the collaboration that happens at these face-to-face events is really important. Your presence also validates the hard work of the speakers, the hard work of the conference committee and the organizers, some of whom are in this room. Obviously it drives ticket money and it drives sponsorship money, and the whole circle feeds together. So I do think this is one way that people contribute. And oh, I forgot to click and show you that I had the PostgresOpen picture there. Okay, the second way is to support local meetups and user groups. It's along the same vein, it's just in your backyard typically. You can attend, give talks, share your learnings. This is actually a screenshot of Postgres Women New York City, which is a new meetup that Renee Phillips, sitting right there, founded earlier this year. And I actually got to go this summer. I was in New York City, so I gave a talk there, which was wonderful. And a lot of the people in the room were really new to Postgres. So it was cool. Like here in this audience, I feel like the newbie still after 2.5 years. There, I was the expert. And so it was nice to kind of have those tables turned a little bit. But there are other ways you can contribute besides giving talks at these or attending or answering people's questions. You can also offer to have your company pay for the food and drink at meetups, or offer to have your company's office space be the place where it happens. A lot of meetups like to rotate and go to different locations to try to make it easier for different people. And so I know that Teresa on my team has been working with the San Francisco Bay Area Postgres meetup, which is the next picture here, to try to offer our office space. I think we've done it twice now. And this is just another meetup in the Postgres area that I'm familiar with because I live in California. And their July meetup had a speaker from Microsoft. It was hosted at the company next door in San Francisco, and the food was provided by PostgreSQL experts, and Christoph and Stacy organized it, Christoph Pettis and Stacy Hazler. So a lot of parties involved in making it happen, and I think it adds real value for the people in the room who are there to learn. So then obviously you can give a talk. That's another way to share your expertise and contribute, whether it's at conferences or meetups, and lightning talks are super valuable too. I actually, as I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, and if you don't have time to create a talk, you could just offer to create a lightning talk. And then I realized, wait a minute, lightning talks are more work than a 45-minute talk, because you got to figure out how to cut and cut and cut and make it super tight and short. So I put a screenshot up here for Magnus. This is a CFP that's already closed for PGConf EU, but it just seemed like a good time to plug that that's happening next month in Milan, and I think it's not sold out yet. There are still tickets. There are still tickets available if those of you who haven't made your plans to go to Italy yet. And I was just going to highlight that the CFP teams, they work really hard to welcome new speakers and not just always the same people. And I think that's really good. And I always try to remind people that they should feel encouraged to take that first jump, to make that first application. And I also remind them that really good speakers, often only 50% of their talk submissions get accepted. So if you do get rejected, don't feel bad, because it happens to everyone. All right, so then post your slides online. I cannot emphasize this enough. We post, Citus, our team, and then some of us post individually as well, the same talk, on both SpeakerDeck and SlideShare. So there's SpeakerDeck's logo and SlideShare. But what, I'm going to go back. What you can see is the number of people who viewed those slides, and you get a feel for, it's not really a feel for what's more interesting. It's often a reflection of what you've done a better job promoting, right? What you have tweeted more about, what the conference organizers have tweeted more about. But we did a measurement. We looked at a whole year, all of our team's slides that were up digitally on SpeakerDeck and SlideShare, and we compared that to the number of people in the room, because we always, when people on our team present, we always count the number of people, and the number of digital slide views exceeded the number of people in the room. And that's with some presentations, like I gave a keynote earlier this year to 400 people. So, we do give some pretty big talks, and digital still exceeded. So I just encourage people to do that. It just makes the information accessible to a broader audience and to people who cannot necessarily afford or don't have the time to go to the events. Oh, one of my fonts is not visible here. That's weird. It's just the color. So, yeah, it's not my laptop. If you do anything to promote Postgres, be proactive to enable discovery of Postgres by new people. Well, this is going to happen in a bunch of places, isn't it? We'll see. And here I was just trying to say that when you are creating content, maybe you wrote a really great blog, you can't just publish it and assume people will read it. You kind of have to think about who's going to benefit from it and how do I reach them? How do I enable them to discover it? We put a lot of thought into SEO and making sure the right keywords are there, making sure people are going to find stuff via Google search. But sometimes it's a matter of not just sending something to your inner circle, but reaching out beyond your inner circle because they probably know people who wouldn't have heard about whatever this thing is. I know that Louise was telling me that some of the efforts she's been involved in, they really put a lot of thought, maybe PG Day Paris is a good example, into how to reach people who aren't already in that kind of inner circle. All right, so these letters look good, that's good. Obviously you can write a blog. So I included this picture of a magazine. I have the actual magazine here. Sorry about the video. I'll come right back. Letitia just published an article in here about Postgres. It's French. I haven't read it because it's in French. But the article is here, and I just think it's super cool that in addition to writing blog posts, more and more people have always published on D-Zone, for example, and a lot of blog posts hit Hacker News in the United States. But it's nice to get articles published, too, that reach a broader audience, reach people who don't pay attention to D-Zone. Or it's a great way to share your learnings, share your expertise, and get more people involved in Postgres. So thank you for that, Letitia. Number 7, you can syndicate to Planet Postgres to increase the reach of your blog posts. So how many of you actually do syndicate to Planet Postgres already? Okay, so I'm preaching to the choir here. How many of you follow Planet Postgres on Twitter? Okay, 3/4 of you. I follow it on Twitter, and I find it a fabulous way to keep up with what's going on. From all the different companies and all the different players in this space, a lot of people do syndicate it, and that means a tweet comes out whenever a new post comes out, which is great. You can also see the list of posts on postgresql.org, which is kind of, I tried to take a screenshot of this in a nice narrow margin. And then the policies are all available on postgresql.org as well about what's legitimately able to syndicate through Planet Postgres. But it's a really great way. A lot of times, I manage the Citus social accounts, which even though we've been acquired by Microsoft, I kind of have kept the Citus accounts going. And sometimes I'll tweet about some new blog post by Craig Kirsteins. He does a great job with our blog. And the Planet Postgres tweet about it will get more retweets and more likes than my Citus one will. It really does have quite a bit of reach. So recommend that. And then Sketchnotes. How many of you have used Sketchnotes? Oh, there you go, Letitia. Okay, wonderful. It's a super effective way to share some of your learnings. In fact, I'm thinking about at PGConf.eu, I might try sketchnoting a few of the talks and posting those on Twitter to see how it works. But if you search on Twitter right now and you search for the Sketchnotes hashtag, the same thing it's just that word, all concatenated, Sketchnotes as a hashtag, you will see so many examples. And they're all different and they're all unique. There's no one pattern, there's no one right way to do things. But it enables you, I think, if you're doing it, to listen better because you're trying to figure out what are those high-level takeaways? What are the most important things that I want to retain and that I want to share with other people? And it's useful. There's a designer named Christina Wadke who lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. I think she teaches on human-computing interaction at Stanford. She was an early designer at LinkedIn, and I think I was taking a class at Stanford once, and she was one of the guest lecturers. So I've been following her on Twitter ever since, and she told a story earlier this year about how she had a class, and she had half the students I think it wasn't 2 classes. I think it was 1 class, half and half. But either way, there was a control group and there was the experimental group. And the control group just followed her lectures and read the materials the way they normally would. And the experimental group, she required them to submit a sketch note for every chapter that they had to read. And the experimental group performed significantly better on the tests in the class, because that act of writing it down and really thinking about what matters in that visual way just helped them retain the information better. But I don't think that's the main reason to do it. I personally, wearing my marketing hat, think the main reason to do it is it's a great way to share information. And this particular graphic is from an engineer at Okta, the security company. He's actually more on the evangelism side too, and his name is David Neal, Reverend Geek on Twitter. Really fun to follow. I learned a ton of stuff from him. Okay, so here there's some text missing as well, and the text says create user stories at the top. That is the thing that we're trying to say here, and the recipe is missing too. I can't even read it on here. Okay, well, this was on Josh Burkas' list too. Creating customer stories is huge. I think many of you in this room have a really good understanding of why Postgres is better than some other databases for certain use cases, or how customer A is using Postgres to do some really amazing thing. And I don't think those stories get shared enough. And it's not actually that hard. So the recipe that I recommend is you have someone really knowledgeable do the interview, and you record it. And just, we usually record using, I don't know, Zoom, no, not Zoom anymore, Teams. We used to use WebEx. You can use whatever recording device you want. And then there's a lot of services, we use rev.com, that will create a transcript. They'll create the transcript in 24 hours, it costs like $100 US, and then you've got a transcript to give a writer. The writers that I hire to help create these stories cost anywhere between $750 to $1,250. So I know that big companies can go spend $15,000 on a customer story, but you don't need to. You can get top-notch, brilliant, best of their game writers for that freelance amount that I just mentioned, $750 to $1,250. And then you have to give them really good style guidelines and terminology guidelines, where you tell them, this is how I want to talk about the Postgres Explain plan. This is what this product name is. You know, this is what I don't want to say. How do you feel about naming competitive technologies? Do you want to, you know, hit them head on? Do you want to not mention them at all? Whatever your guidelines are, you just have to express those. And then you can iterate a couple times and have a really strong customer story. We usually focus on, see these big font numbers. We try to pull some of those metrics out of our customers. See this headline? I usually will have what I call a section headline. I'll have 6 or 7 of them in a story, because a lot of people don't like to read copy, not unless they're persuaded that it's worth their time. So I try to make sure that you can understand the gist of the story just by reading 6 or 7 section headlines. And maybe that'll motivate you to read the whole thing. And then diagrams are gold. If you can get a workflow diagram from the user or an architectural block diagram, that resonates really well with the developer community. So I think these are gold, and I encourage everybody to create more of them. I wish there were more on Postgres, and I hope in a year there will be even more than there are now. Okay, so this one says, promote Postgres on Twitter, number 10. I'll have to fiddle around with fixing this next time. And obviously, here's a picture of the PostgreSQL, which is the community Twitter handle, which I follow, and so do 13,600 other people, which is pretty cool, because this Twitter handle was just recreated about a year ago, right? Looking at Magnus. Do you remember? 2 years? Okay. Oh, okay then. No, but it wasn't formed till after that, I remember. That's when I joined Citus.
January 2018.
Okay, got it. So really, it's great to follow, but it's even better to share your learnings, share your ideas, share your posts. TIL, today I learned. QOTD, quote of the day. OH, overheard, right? A lot of times those little informal, casual learnings are worth sharing, and other people will get benefit out of them. And that creates, I think, more understanding, more awareness, and will help Postgres grow. And then I think this is probably the most important slide in the deck out of all the 21 ways. Say thank you to people. A lot of people here do that. I was in a conversation earlier today with someone who's only been in the Postgres community for 2 years, and that person was talking about how welcome they feel and how they feel like their contribution has been embraced even though they don't have that decade's worth of experience here. But I think all of us could say thank you more, and it makes people feel good. So this particular tweet, which was from Louise Grandjean, or Louise Meta is how I think of her on Twitter, about Sam's talk that she attended at the Postgres Women New York City meetup, which she also gave yesterday. Yesterday, and I wasn't here, so I didn't. How many of you were in Sam's talk yesterday? Okay, was it good? Awesome. What? You were speaking at the same time? Okay, got it. So I liked how Louise not only thanked her and gave her that private positive feedback, but she thanked her publicly, which both are nice and both have their place. But I think it contributes a lot to the culture of an organization. It makes people feel good. Maybe when times are tough or they're questioning what they're going to do or they're deciding between their 2 next jobs, maybe feeling valued and appreciated will help them stick with Postgres as opposed to, taking some job with Redis or something like that. And I think that's all I have to say about that. But it really, really is important. And I don't think any of us do it enough. And I'm literally saying that to myself as I state this. Okay, so another way you can contribute to Postgres is to use video to show what Postgres can do. A lot of people write blogs, and that's great, but not everybody processes written information as easily. And a how-to video can be brilliant and can reach other people, reach more people. Some people just learn that way. This particular video I created with an engineer at Citus named Marco Slot. Some of you know him. He's based in Amsterdam. And I also worked with my designer, and I went through, I was the producer, but I went through and circled and highlighted and told the designer what I wanted to emphasize. But the core of the demo came from the engineer, and he used a tool called ScreenFlow, which is produced by some company named Telestream, and it's Mac only. And he used that to capture both the audio and the video. There's a lot of screencasting tools out there, though, that the others are probably equally good, but we just happen to use ScreenFlow. And it works. And I think right now, 3,500 views, it's been only 6 months. You can reach a lot of people. Although, to be fair, that is on the Microsoft Azure channel, so that probably helps get a lot of attention as well, because it's about using Citus and Postgres on Azure. And then the other thing I was going to say is you can't just create a short 4-minute video. And by the way, it's a lot harder to produce a 4-minute video. Whoa, okay, I better boogie. Than it is to produce a 30-minute video. It's hard to make things short. But metadata matters too. So thinking about what are people going to be searching on, and what should I have my title be, and how do I help them discover it? And putting in video bookmarks, and down here on the bottom I have those little green squares. Let me see if I can highlight those for you. Sometimes if someone's read that far, I'll put links back to our website or back to more information in case they want to keep going and learn something more. So the video bookmarks are key as well. All right, number 13. The text came through. So give teams and projects social proof, public validation. So this is kind of riffing off of that notion of saying thank you. I was talking to an engineer the other day, and she said, when I go to a new Git repo and I don't know much about that project, the first thing I look at is the last activity, the last commit date. And that makes sense, right? Because what are you trying to do? You're trying to understand the health and vibrancy of a project. So you want to know the recency of the last commit, the amount of activity, and also the size of community. And I think that's where stars come in, is giving a relative feel of the size of community. Now, there are a lot of people who don't bother with that, but if you see 30,000 stars and a lot of people don't bother with that, then you feel like, that community is pretty darn big. So I actually am generous with GitHub stars, right? When I run across a utility and I talk to an engineer about how useful it is, I find out it's open source, I go onto GitHub, I throw out a star. I want to be one of those people that kind of gives someone a thumbs up. And that does influence people who are new and are coming to try to find out more. Okay, so now write books that make it easier for newcomers to use Postgres. So Dimitri's not here, but there's a picture of the art of Postgres. I couldn't help it. He has this beautiful new cover. He's been learning a lot about marketing. I think he's doing pretty well with that. But if you find that you're constantly answering the same questions, or that people are constantly asking the same questions, maybe there's a book to be written. And if you're a writer, maybe that's one of the ways you can contribute. Maybe if you've written a whole series of blog posts and you realize they connect thematically, and it wouldn't take much to put them into a book, maybe that would be another way for people to find it. Another book that someone was telling me is super popular is Marcus's SQL Performance Explained book. And I haven't read it myself. This is the English edition, so I can't talk about the language being a barrier. But I did just learn about it last week. I can put it on my reading list, and you can actually find this on Amazon. So think about the additional reach that you're getting when you write a book and how that can help newcomers join in. All right, so the next thing is support people trying new things to grow the Postgres community. And what I was thinking about here is that if Postgres has grown a certain amount, but if thinking like Fibonacci growth, we want to increase the slope of that curve, do we just do the same things we've always done, or do we need to try new things? Do we need to experiment a little bit? And when Postgresibiza came out or was announced earlier this year, I remember having a debate with someone about whether it was a boondoggle. Does everyone know what boondoggle means? Okay. Whether it was a boondoggle or whether it was a really good experiment to try to build up a following for a conference in a new location. And I had the same feeling about a Python event called PyCaribbean. One of my colleagues presented there for a couple of years, and I was like, gosh, that just feels like such a boondoggle. You're going to the Caribbean in the middle of winter. How serious can that be? Well, then Teresa talked to the conference organizers and discovered that they have some of the best attendance because the attendees want to go somewhere warm in the winter. So it kind of makes sense. You kind of go to where your audience is willing to go and wants to go. So my philosophy is I think we should support people who are trying new things. Now, another example of a team trying new things is PG Day Santiago, which is happening next month in Chile. And I first learned about this through Boris, am I going to pronounce his last name right? Mejias? Someone tell me, did I say it right? Okay. So I met Boris at PGConf.eu. He was my room host last fall in Lisbon. And he has a very good friend in Santiago. They started talking. His friend Miguel decided to found and start this event, and they're working hard to bring it to fruition. But what's interesting about it is it's all in Spanish, or at least mostly in Spanish. And so that's not something that I believe is commonly done. I'm looking at Magnus. Is that correct? Yes?
There are a couple, there's PGDE, which is all in German. No,
two-track.
Absolutely, it's not. He runs it, so he would know. I thought the PGDE was all German. That's what I was told. No, we have more than 5 talks in English. You have PGD France. All in French.
PG Day France, all in French. I'm repeating for the video. Swiss PG Day, which I talked at, I think had both an English track and a German track. Okay, PG Day DE was 2-track, 1 English, 1 German. Okay, do we have any Spanish tracks so far? Is this the first?
What I submitted, let's see. Okay.
Okay, well, I wanted to commend them as trying something new, experimenting. It's a brand new PG Day in a new location in a language that we don't often have PG Days in. You were going to say something?
PG Day Cuba is, I think, primarily Spanish.
Ooh.
The way they speak Spanish in Cuba is nice. Please record it. Okay. Yeah.
PG Day Cuba is predominantly in Spanish, we believe, and it's actually coming up. It's in November of this year. There's going to be another PG Day Cuba. And Andreas is going to be there. That's wonderful. Okay, I'm going to keep going because I'm running out of time. So now, reach out to evangelize at your local university or your alma mater. Offering to give a talk and influence those students before they've made their choices about what technology they want to work on or what company they want to go to is super powerful. Now, this picture is from Twitter. Devrim Gunduz took it at FOSDEM earlier this year. So it's authentic in that it was taken in a university classroom, but these are all FOSDEM attendees, not college students per se, although there might be a few college students in the mix. But I think this is a powerful way to contribute to Postgres. And it's actually nice because it often helps you if you're hiring or recruiting, getting access to that kind of pipeline of students and staying in touch with the professors is useful on a professional level too. All right, number 17. You're going to not tell me until 5 minutes? Okay, that's scary. How many minutes am I at? 7. Oh, gotta go fast. Okay, stickers. Stickers are a thing. This is a picture of part of my laptop. Now, some of you have pristine laptops, like Letitia has a single Postgres sticker. And then I'm looking at Sarah's laptop, and yours is like mine. You're just covered. Oh, okay. Just Postgres. I can't even see.
It's new. I had it only less than 1 month ago.
I can give you some stickers.
I haven't heard folder.
Okay, anyway, they're a thing. I've actually been on trains. My boss has been in coffee shops. I've been at airports. People will start conversations with me because of the stickers on my laptop. I think it's a nice way to draw connections with, strangers almost, as long as they're not creepy strangers. So stickers are a good thing, mostly. And then if you speak a language other than English, you can help with translations. Magnus and I were just talking about this the other day. It is super useful when Postgres content can reach people who don't speak English. There's a mailing list, PGSQL translators. There's more info that you can find at babel.postgresql.org. Some of the docs are translated into French and Japanese and another language that I've forgotten the name of. But this is a super valuable way to contribute, and there's a lot of people that work really, really hard on this, but I'm sure they want help. All right, 19th. You can start a community PG Day in your town. Now, PG Day Paris has been around for a number of years, and so this isn't some brand new example, but I wanted a really good graphic for a PG Day, and I was taking screenshots of both Nordic and Paris, and I went with the Eiffel Tower this time. What's interesting about PG Days is they're a lot more affordable for people, both in terms of travel and in terms of their time. It's easy to miss a day of work. It's hard to miss 3 to 4 days of work. So they're also more conducive to building contacts with people because you're in the same room together with people for a day. You don't ever have this circumstance where someone decides to go to the other competing talk at the same time. They're all with you, so it makes the speakers feel good, and you're more likely to talk to or build a connection with the person sitting right next to you if you're all together that same day. And I think a smaller group, Sometimes PG Days might only be 50 people, 60 people, 70, 100 or less. Sometimes they're more, but makes it easier for people who are more shy to build connections. All right, number 20. I actually think if you have design skills, you should use them. Graphics and visuals pull people in. Magnus, I love the PGConf EU Milan sticker that you made. I'm betting it's Sticker Mule, but I don't know what company you used. I like the thickness of it. I like the design of the graphic. It's freaking awesome. I will be putting it on my laptop. But graphics do pull people in. So this is the Citus Data Alicorn. It's the Alicorn because we make Postgres magic by scaling out horizontally. And we have lots of different patterns of it, all kind of riffs on different visualizations of sharding. So you can imagine all these little shards in the Alicorn. So our design mantra is that everything has to have meaning. Nothing can be like unnecessary or superfluous. So they don't exactly look like shards, Renee, but you just have to squint your eyes a little bit, and then you can decide they're shards. I did an experiment at a Python event a year ago where I created 5 different sticker patterns, and then I wanted to see which was the best Alicorn so I could print only those in the future. And what I found is people like choice. They like variety. They like picking the ones that best fit them. So now we always have a ton of different sticker patterns so people can find what they want. Louise always uses graphics in her fabulous Postgres talks, Louise Grandjonc. And so this is the owl from one of her recent talks. If you haven't met the owl yet, it's just freaking adorable, and it helps to pull people in. She also uses really good examples in her SQL examples. And then the final thing is to make people feel welcome. I think that's something many, many people in the Postgres community do, and I think that's part of why I have stayed working in the space for 2.5 years so far. But I wanted to point out that being welcome is a little different than just being open. You know, being welcoming means you make sure to invite people, right? Not just put up a sign that says you're open and hope people see it. You make sure to invite them, and then you make sure that they got the invitation, right? That it didn't land in their spam box, or that they didn't overlook it somehow. And this is true not just of developers and people we want to become contributors and core committers, but also designers, translators, marketers, documentation writers, podcasters, you know, whatever the role is, event organizers. I think it's a really good way to help contribute to the growth of the community, the health of the community, and the productivity of the people in it. You know, everything keeps changing in the world, and Postgres can't stay the same, which is why people are already working so hard on it. And if we want even more people to join in, we just have to be welcoming. And so that's it. That's the set of 21 ways. And I had to give you one more amazing picture of a Fibonacci spiral in nature, just because. And I actually found a couple spirals in there. So I made one white and one is pink. The pink doesn't show up as well. And then my ask of you is to please share any ideas or suggestions you have for this talk besides making the fonts work, making the projector work. I will be giving it again in Milan at PGConf.eu next month. So I love feedback. I love really critical feedback. So if you have ideas of other examples, do let me know. And there's going to be a survey for the conference. Obviously, giving them good feedback or bad feedback is nice too. But personally, I would love to iterate on this and make it even better. And then thank you for joining us here at PostgresOpen. And there are all my Twitter handles, if any of you need them for any reason. And I also, you can't see it in white there, it says join me. I have the name of the citusdata.com/newsletter URL, just in case any of you don't yet subscribe and you want to. Comes out every month, links to technical blog posts. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Elapsed 44 minutes. Oh my goodness. Are there any questions before we finish up? Are we good? You have to pee. Take that out of the video. No talking about peeing. Okay, I think we're good. I think it's the end of the day. We're all done. Thank you.